we also need to talk about the Dejenne. Now, they are living in an area around the Niger River, and this is an area that's very similar to the Fertile Crescent, an area where the river floods regularly, you get fertile land. It's very closely following the river. The Dejenne in Mali are on high ground surrounding the river, and we see evidence of blacksmiths, sculptors, and potters. We're looking at a couple of different pieces in this society, starting with the archer. Now, the archer is a terracotta figure. This entire area is known for terracotta work. This is really common when you have a society developing along a river. Many rivers have clay along their banks, and that clay can easily be used for sculpture. It doesn't take that much to take a ball of clay from its raw state, add a couple of elements to it, and make something that's going to create a permanent piece, a permanent sculpture. Now, production of these terracotta figures will fall when Islam is introduced. This piece, unfortunately, is the result of an illegal excavation, meaning that we don't have any context. We don't know if it was a burial piece, if it comes from a temple, if it was part of some kind of shaman tradition. We just have no way of knowing. The figure itself has a quiver of arrows as well as knives strapped to its arm. So we can assume that we're not dealing with, for example, a baker. It gives us some context. This is probably some kind of warrior tradition. We also see very different proportions. They've stretched the figure. We see a very thin and tall figure with these very tubular arms and legs. So what do I mean by that? When you look at the arms, for example, the arms are nothing more than cylinders. They haven't developed the deltoid and the bicep, etc. in the figure. This is not necessarily a lack of skill. Rather, this could easily be a stylization. This is what they felt was perfect for their form, for their time. You'll also notice that the face has been stylized. It's been stretched. We see the stretching of the nose and the jawline, pulling the mouth down. And that is almost certainly stylization. This could have been something that they saw as beautiful, a long face. It could also have been symbolic in some way. But again, we lack that context. And this is very characteristic of the Dejenne style. Now, we also have to look at the Great Mosque. And this is in Mali. And it's a great example of adobe architecture. So this is basically using clay and mud mixed with straw to build a structure. Very similar to what we see, for example, in the southwestern United States. Now, we know that fire destroyed the structure in 1830, and it will be rebuilt. In terms of floor plan, like many mosques, this is a hypostyle hall. So this hall, the actual prayer hall, has a flat roof which is held up by a series of columns. And you can see it's a forest of columns. Now, this means that you can put a great deal of people in here, but it does break the visual and auditory lines. So you get a lot of spaces where you might not be able to hear. And this will be changed later on, not in this case, but when you look at Islam, they'll move to more dome-like structures later in their history. The facade itself is unique in the use of vertical structures. We see a lot of vertical columns here, all of them engaged, but always drawing the eye up. Well, of course, this is a spiritual structure. And so by drawing the eye to the heavens, just like we see in cathedrals and other structures, it draws your mind towards spirituality, or at least that's the likely idea behind it. We see wooden beams which serve a couple of different purposes. The main purpose of these is to add scaffolding so that they can repair the outside of the building, which is done quite regularly. So they recoat the exterior wall every year. And this is not just because this form of adobe architecture tends to fall apart or anything like that. Oftentimes, it's community building. So the families of this mosque would get together at a set time every year and work together to repair the exterior walls or repair the interior as well. And imagine that for a second. Imagine that you have a church or a school or any civic building that you're tied to. And you can look at it and go, yeah, I did that. I repaired that. It suddenly draws you in. It tightens that community. And that's really the idea behind a lot of these religious structures, a lot of these religious organizations. So they're doing it through repair. And they maintain a building that, even though it was built in the current version that we see is from the mid-19th century or mid-19th century, it looks brand new. And this gives them a sense of pride and a sense of belonging.